Hey everyone, Samantha Hildebrandt here with Type 1 Tribe. Welcome back to my channel. I am so happy you are here. Today I want to talk about diabetes technology, specifically Dexcoms, CGMs, and the differences between Dexcom G6 and Dexcom G7. So I was diagnosed in February of 2021. And when I was diagnosed, I was immediately put on Dexcom G6. So 1 week after I was in the hospital, I went to the endocrinologist and she got me set up with Dexcom G6. So it has been 4 years of me being on Dexcom G6, which, by the way, I am so thankful for. Using a CGM is such an amazing thing. Probably most diabetics, I mean, most of the ones that I have asked would pick their CGM over their pump when it comes to diabetes technology. If they had to choose one, they would choose their CGM. And I'm on MDI, so I'm not on a pump. However, I absolutely love my CGM. I love being able to access my blood sugar levels every 5 minutes. And it's just so nice not having to carry a meter around. But I was also blessed that I was diagnosed as an adult 4 years ago, and I never actually had to fully only carry a meter around. I've always been on a CGM, which is super amazing. I know people that were diagnosed, years ago always had to carry on their meters, which would not be fun. So you guys are rock stars. But thankfully, I didn't ever have to do that. So a few days ago, I actually ran out of my G6s and I reached out to my endocrinologist and asked her to send in more G6s to the pharmacy. So I went to the pharmacy and I went to pick it up. Unfortunately, the endocrinologist assistant sent in Dexcom G7s. And naturally, me being a type A, very quick person, I did not even look at my prescription order. I just purchased it and I went home. And so when I got home, I was opening the box and I was like, oh my God, they gave me G7s, not G6s. What do I do? Because I also just purchased a transmitter. So I was like, G7s, you don't need transmitters. And so I'm like, well, I just spent money on a transmitter. I really need my G6s. So I reached back out to my endocrinologist and said, hey, you sent me the wrong Dexcoms. Please put it in another order. But unfortunately, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now with Dexcom, it was on back order. And so I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do? So long story short, I officially put on a G7. It is on my arm currently, and so far, so good. To be honest, the only reason why I never switched to G7 was because I've heard through the grapevine and through the type 1 diabetes community that G7 is terrible. And so I never wanted to make that switch because G6 was working just fine for me. And I'm like, I'm not going to switch. But I was kind of forced to, this week to switch to a G7. And I said, let's just do it. Let's see how it goes. It's a good time to trial and error. So I just put it on yesterday, so I don't have a ton of feedback for you all. However, one thing I really, really like about the G7 compared to the G6 is the warm-up period. So the warm-up period is 25 minutes, where with a Dexcom G6, it's 2 hours. So that is quite the difference. I mean, if I could just keep that 25 minutes going for every time I add on a new Dexcom, that would be amazing. Especially if you have little kids and like if you're a parent and your little kid has type 1 diabetes, I imagine this is so much more helpful than, going through that 2 hour period of waiting and not knowing what your kid's blood sugar is. That can get scary. And so that is definitely a positive when it comes to G7 compared to G6. Another benefit so far that I really like about the G7 is that it's so much smaller than the G6. And I don't know if you guys feel this way, and maybe this is totally just me, but I'm just giving an opinion on what I think. When I see a Dexcom G6, that is a very medical looking device. Like when I see that, I'm like, okay, that's clearly like a medical issue. Where when I look at the G7, it doesn't look as medically, and I know that's a weird term, but when I see a G7, I feel like I'm like, oh, like there are people in the community that use similar looking CGMs that don't necessarily have diabetes. And while I guess that could be a positive or a negative, I actually think of that as a positive because it doesn't seem so like, oh my God, I have this terrible disease. I never want to seem like I am like sick or I have a sickness. And I feel like the Dexcom G6 does kind of give that vibe, where the G7 is more of, I don't want to say like the cool thing to do, but like, the CGMs that people use that don't have diabetes. That's a whole nother topic, but those look similar to these, like the round, thin ones. And so I feel like people don't look at me like I'm sick if I'm wearing the G7 versus the G6. Now, that is totally my personal opinion. I'm curious to hear what you all think. So leave a comment, message me on Instagram, let me know what you think, because that's just something that I have mentally. And I'm just curious if that's just me or if that's all of you as well. So far, my blood sugar numbers have been fine with the G7. I've only been wearing it for maybe 30 hours. So it hasn't been very long. And I will do another recap after my 10 days is up compared to the G7 and the G6. But I wanted to give initial opinion with the G7 versus the G6. But so far, so good. I mean, the first day, there were a few hours where my blood sugar numbers were not accurate. And I knew for a fact they weren't because it would jump from like 45 to 213. And I'm like, all right, that's just not happening. And so I knew it wasn't accurate and I would just prick my finger. But I've had those issues with G6. And so to me, that's not that big of a deal because it's not like G6 wasn't having those issues. I would run into that occasionally on the first day with G6 on my body. But today, so far, so good. It's been great. My blood sugar numbers seem correct. They seem normal. I do always prick as well just to make sure, it is aligned and the numbers are showing the correct number. So if you're new to wearing a Dexcom, I highly recommend using a meter the first even second day, just to clarify that the numbers are correct. So really, so far, so good with the G7. I don't know why I was so against it. And, it's just been a really good experience so far. Like I mentioned, it's only been a day. And so I am going to, evaluate it a bit longer before formally switching to the G7. However, I did look in my little diabetes supplies pantry closet area, and I do still have a few transmitters in my closet. And so I will be going back to G6 at some point because I need to use those transmitters. I've already paid for them. So I will be using them. So I will be going back to G6 at least for some portion just because I have the supplies. But I don't really think G7 at this point is worse than G6. I know that's been like the community talk. Maybe Dexcom as a company has been working on it, making G7 better, but so far it's good. Another thing that I really like about the G7 is the like insertion process. So when I added it to my body, it is just one device, which is so nice because if you've used G6, you know that you have to have the transmitter and the sensor. Well, with G7, it's just the one sensor, I guess is what they call it. You don't need that extra transmitter. It's all in one, all in this beautiful little circle. And it's just really easy to put on your body. Not that G6, I think it's hard. I just think it's maybe a little bit easier. You don't need as many supplies to take with you if you're traveling or so on and so forth. It all is just like smaller. G7 is just smaller. And so I definitely think we're moving in the right direction when it comes to diabetes supplies. I think everything is slowly getting better, slowly getting smaller. And it's just really, really great. So I just wanted to do a quick recap of what I've experienced so far. If you have any feedback based on your G6 to G7 switch, please let me know. I'd love to hear it. And I will see you all next week. Bye.